We are here to talk about the 1968 film If by Lindsay Anderson with Malcolm McDowell, yes?
Of course.
Yeah, you did watch that movie, right?
Did we all watch that movie?
I
Or
mean, I watched it.
Yeah, I watched it with those things that keep your eyes open. That, of course, we all know from Malcolm McDowell's other classic movie.
You were in the Ludovico device.
Yeah.
that is what I felt like I was strapped to for the movie we are actually planning to talk about.
Let's talk about that movie. In 2020, there was some very difficult times. So difficult that John Krasinski might have spent that whole year at a doorway looking at his kids, kind of playing an imaginary world, a world of freedom, love, and virtue. And him just watching them. And ultimately, much like everyone else, 2020 sucked. So those kids asked him, "Hey, Daddy, are we gonna be okay?" And you know what John Krasinski said? "Let me go make a movie." And that movie became If 2024, a magical world where this little girl gets to meet imaginary friends, hang out with Deadpool, and go to Nathan's famous hot dog stand in Coney Island. To figure this child's movie out, I took my two adult daughters to the movies. One of them,
Marcy.
but we have a new one on the horn here.
Hi, I'm Michelle.
And Michelle is a writer, a film critic. You can see some of her work at rogerebert.com and the film stage. She also keeps a monumental, an epic letterbox with over 6,000 movies journaled, right?
I believe it's somewhere around that at this point.
Incredible.
I don't know how incredible it is, but thank you.
And today we're going to put a milestone on that journey you've taken, if.
Yeah, Michelle, when like 10 years from now, you're going to like be showing your letterbox to the next generation, and you'll be like, this is the moment that really everything culminated. It was when I saw If.
God, that would be a sad culmination.
Okay, I feel like you're coming in hot. So let's not keep the doves waiting out there in podcast land. Tell us, give me an overview of what you think of John Krasinski's 2024 If.
So, If is a movie about a child who finds that she can see imaginary friends who are referred to as ifs, as her father is in the hospital for an unspecified heart ailment. And I saw the trailer for this and just was filled with dread because I was invited to see it, to talk about it here, and knew I was not going to enjoy it.
You heard the iPhone ping, and you were like, "Oh, wonderful! A message from my friends." Worst message you've gotten.
Yeah, I already did not have very high expectations because I don't often enjoy children's movies that are explicitly about the wonders of imagination. I find they often don't have any, and that's kind of what I felt about this. I felt it was extremely derivative of a lot of different things that Krasinski is both openly pulling from and maybe not as intentionally in some places. Like, there's a lot of like Spielberg's children's movies in this. There's a lot of Pixar in this. There's a lot of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which I'm a little less familiar with than Marcy. But like, there's also just, it mostly feels like his great ambition, Krasinski's, was to make a bad children's film from the 90s.
I see that.
It feels like a bad, like something that Robin Williams would have starred in the 90s. Like, I'm thinking of something like Jack, the one where he is a child who is growing super fast, but not in
He's a whole ass adult.
but not in a way that's actually recognizably progeria or anything like that. And that movie is oddly directed by Francis Ford Coppola, the director of Megalopolis.
The King?
Very weird, bad children's movie that both has like art jokes, but it's also a movie that is trying to be a very serious film about mortality.
That is frankly what this movie is
Yes,
about.
exactly.
This movie is about death. But let me bring Marcy in. What are your general thoughts?
Yeah,
here?
well, I guess I'll bring in some of the Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends knowledge. I mean, the fact that they named one of the main imaginary friends Blue, when the main imaginary friend in Foster's is also named Blue.
I got some stuff on that.
Yeah, it's like why? And like in Foster's Home, they have like this whole house with imaginary friends, and then this one is like a retirement home that's like underneath like a carousel in an abandoned theme park. And really like all the imaginary friends like have so much less imagination than the ones in Foster's Home.
Yeah, imagination like pink alligator.
Yeah, like a lot of them are just like things that you can see or like slight variations on like real things. So, yeah, not a good movie. Like my main reaction to this movie was that I was bored. But like I would say I'm not as much of a Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds hater as my other two pals on this podcast today, but yeah, definitely this didn't make me like them anymore. I don't think that I think that Krasinski does better work in the Quiet Place movies.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Michelle's giving me some eyes here.
Yeah, I definitely would rather rewatch A Quiet Place than this, but I was a big detractor of that one as well. I similarly thought it was an interesting idea that was underimagined and not that well directed or acted, especially on his part. I thought his performance in it was really bad.
Yeah, Emily Blunt was definitely the acting MVP of that one.
I would agree with that much.
Yeah, definitely not the flour that's being poured onto the street to make muffled walking paths. So, although that was good. Let's talk about the movie. The movie starts with a little bit of a montage, a camcorder, which is a good, I think, Schenectady for like how technology is used in this movie. Is recording John Krasinski, his beautiful wife, who isn't Emily Blunt, and the child actor. We see them just kind of frolic around, and then eventually there is some images of the hospital, and the mom is at the hospital.
R.I.P.
And that is the thing, right? The mother just gets killed in the montage.
It's very Disney style, or in this case, directly derivative of the opening of Up.
True. One of the things about of that sequence in Up versus what happened here is that that was a much more impactful scene because the wife was an active participant in the relationship, not just furniture for John Krasinski's affection.
That's kind of how I felt about it. Pretty much immediately, I was not feeling this movie because it was straining for effect that I don't think it was getting. The opening of Up, you get like the history of the whole relationship, and you get like at least the ability to imagine what their lives were like together. And here, it really just feels like a bunch of visual cliches. And there was really only one touch in that opening montage that didn't feel like it was designed to make me cry and shot specifically in a way that it was tried to make me cry in a way that I wasn't feeling. The only moment that really felt honest was a kid performing like a Tina Turner song that clearly her parents were playing around her a lot, and the movie ends up taking that and making it feel dishonest and insincere later on.
I mean, I was listening to Barry Manilow
Yeah,
as a kid because that's what my parents played. But
right. That's what the
do
part
I like
that I
Barry
buy.
Manilow now? Yes.
That's the part that I buy because a lot of kids, their first likes will be things that their parents liked and that were playing a lot. And there's like just a kernel of something I believe there that I don't think Krasinski actually utilizes well for the rest of the movie.
And the whole thing is that like she gets killed by some illness of some sort, and I immediately, kind of like you, I had this feeling that this is not starting off well. I might not like this, purely because I can only think about, okay, was John Krasinski sitting down somewhere with a pen and paper, writing out this scene, and then saying, "Oh, I love my wife. I love her so much that when she's dead, I'm gonna love her even more."
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like Krasinski probably was just like, okay, I need to make a movie the kids can enjoy, the dads will love even more, and it'll make everything even brighter. Because he had that thing in 2020 where he made like only good news, only news that'll make you happy.
Yeah, the show's called Some Good News.
And he's like, all right, it's obviously it's gonna have a bunch of imaginary friends, and it's gonna be about a father and a daughter, and how do we make sure that it's just about them? I know, kill off the mom.
But for like what cost? Because after the montage, we learned that the daughter now is a little older and is coming back to the grandma's apartment, beautiful apartment, very expensive looking apartment in New York City, and now we learned that John Krasinski, now he has some illness of some sort.
An unspecified heart ailment.
Mm.
Yeah, speaking of the grandma, I'll just say I think Fiona Shaw may have given my favorite human performance in the movie.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a scene later on that I really like where she's the main focus of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, any scene with an old woman dancing, that's going to make catnip for AP.
Yeah, and it's also just one of the things that I will tackle on here is how sincere this movie is. And I have thoughts about that. But we know that John Krasinski is also dying. So thank you. John Krasinski does something that he does a lot in this movie, which is he hits the same emotional note twice. But without any consideration of what the first emotional note meant. It's just like it's a repetition of images and motifs just for the sake of it.
You're speaking specifically about the illness?
About the illness.
Yeah.
And about a parent dying.
Yeah, and
like, what does it matter?
Yes, and also his character doesn't take it seriously and tries to play it off as a joke, as a way to soften the impact, but in a way that feels like it would be more traumatic toward his daughter than anything else, like just kind of inconsiderate of her feelings.
Yeah, this little girl already went through it.
Yes, and she is forced to be the more adult person in the family, but the movie also seems to think that she's trying too hard to grow up and needs to be a kid, which I don't know. It feels like it's a movie that values the imagination and innocence of childhood, but doesn't actually take into account that childhood can be a very confusing and fraught time, and even for children who with a largely happy childhood. So I don't think Krasinski really at any point feels like he's being especially honest about what a child's feelings would be as they're losing as they've lost their parent, as they're potentially losing another parent, because the Some Good News mention is, I think, appropriate. There's just kind of a forced happy face on it, like one that's been tattooed on someone's face.
Okay, I get that. Let me. We learn about his illness through this little dance sequence. Did you find that charismatic?
I immediately hated him.
Yeah, I didn't hate him as much. I don't know. I think. Well, here I have a question. Michelle, have you ever liked John Krasinski in a role?
Almost never. I don't like him on The American Office. I think he is a human smirk on that show. And I think the time I have enjoyed him the most is actually a movie where there are at least a few miscalculated elements, and it is Cameron Crowe's much maligned Aloha.
Yeah, definitely a lot of film Twitter fans of that one.
There is a lot about it that doesn't work, but it is one of the few things that I felt used his tendency to over emote well.
Yeah, because I'll say for me, I definitely liked Krasinski at first on The Office. I think definitely in the later seasons, like his character just became like a douchebag, and like I didn't like him. But like I don't really blame him for that. I blame the writing, because the writing on the final few seasons just wasn't very good. So I feel like I don't have the same instinctual hate for Krasinski that you have. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like a lot of this movie just kind of evaporates. Like, um, you could be like, oh yeah, the dance sequence, it connects with the Fiona Shaw's dance sequence later on. But yeah, like his character was kind of weird because like you only see him like in like 30-second increments. Like, she like the daughter keeps like visiting him. He's always like hiding somewhere. You kind of just keep seeing him just to be reminded that he exists.
And also to be the emotional burden of the girl, of the daughter.
Yes.
As the movie goes on, you realize there's a connection between Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds' character.
We haven't even really introduced Reynolds yet.
Yeah, everyone's favorite actor.
Go ahead. You love Ryan Reynolds so much. What does Ryan Reynolds do here?
So Ryan Reynolds is the person living in the upstairs apartment who, like the main character, B can see the imaginary friends, and so can Ryan Reynolds. And he seems to think of it as a bit of a burden and as something that he has to deal with all these imaginary friends that are both annoying to him and are sad because they've been forgotten by their kids who have grown up.
In that scene, we learn later on in the first half of the movie, like Ryan Reynolds is like skulking around this little girl's room. He breaks and enters a child's room,
which is, yeah, I was grimacing throughout that whole scene.
Same. To meet the first imaginary friend that we learn about, and then they rendezvous back in the apartment. And in that scene, we meet the second imaginary friend. The first one being Blue, the second one being, I don't even know her name. What was that?
I don't know, the dancing thing.
Buttercup or something.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like a ladybug type character, like a rubber hose 1940s Disney.
Was that Phoebe Waller-Bridge? Or?
Yes, that was Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yeah, so
it's an all-star cast as all of the imaginary friends. Steve Carell is Blue. He's very annoying in this.
Yeah, so it was a reunion of season 1 of Killing Eve, since Fiona Shaw was on that show, and then of course
Steve Carell was in that.
It's a reunion of Killing Eve and The Office and a lot of other things.
In that scene, we get some a glimpse into the mythology of friends, of these imaginary friends. One of them being that comes from Blue, which is, most people have imaginary friends, but they forget about them. And when I saw that, I immediately started having existential crisis of hearing those words from technically someone that should know the rules of this world, and that being that, one, there's 8 billion people on Earth right now, but estimated for humanity, there's been 100 billion people to have ever existed. So that means that 100 billion imaginary friends may have come to existence and may have been forgotten and died.
Cool. I love that.
I would love that if the movie actually did kind of explore that, or like there were any sort of consequences of them being forgotten beyond they're a little sad, and there were any. I don't. The movie insists that these kids as adults still need their imaginary friends for comfort, which I find. I know it's a movie for children, but it just feels infantilizing more than anything else, and it feels also like one of those movies about like an adult that has grown up too much and needs to find their inner child, and it usually involves them being intensely obnoxious, and this really feels like no exception.
That's why Ryan Reynolds is there.
Yeah, it's why Ryan Reynolds was there. It's why John Krasinski is there. It feels like the kind of thing I said that it wants to be a bad 90s like children's movie. Like I feel like the two characters would be played by like Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. Like if it had been made at that time,
If only.
that would have been better as inconsistent as their material choices of material can be.
It would have been more emotionally complex.
I can't wait to see who's going to be the next generation of Ryan Reynolds and John Krasinski, who, like the generation after us, will be like, like these guys suck. I would have rather had Ryan Reynolds play this role. Remember when he did all those dumb movies?
Yeah, and yet I'm remembering Father's Day with Billy Crystal and Robin Williams and thinking I would really give anything to never see that again.
Well, would it be like Adam Devine from Workaholics and like John Johnson from New Girl? I feel like they kind of fit.
John Johnson.
Josh Johnson?
Jake Johnson, I think.
Jake Johnson. All these motherfuckers have like alliterated names. Like, bro, find another letter in the alphabet, please.
Yeah. Interestingly, well, maybe it's not that interesting. I have enjoyed Ryan Reynolds more often than I have enjoyed John Krasinski. I've liked him in two movies, Adventureland and Mississippi Grind, but that's really about it.
Yeah, I've never seen either. But going back to that scene, like it hit me existentially. Just the idea that because the movie is infantilizing, as you said, but infantilizing to the adults.
Yes.
Like the adults are being infantilized here. Everything from John Krasinski not being able to have a sincere conversation with his child who has already gone through the emotional pain of losing a parent. Also, the grandma, Fiona Shaw, who somehow, this person that's lived however long she's lived and has had a child, she somehow just doesn't know how to cook pancakes now.
And now she needs her imaginary friend to feel something again. It's a similar thing with, we learned that Blue used to be the imaginary friend for Bobby Moynihan, and they're reconnected in a way that is definitely supposed to be heartwarming and like, oh, see, an adult can draw comfort from the things in their childhood, and that's true enough, but I think the way it's done is just so cloying, and it feels so, I don't know, do I really care how this guy like nails his business meeting because he gets like a shoulder rub from his old imaginary friend? Not really.
Like when he's in the bathroom and he's just like, third quarter, 25% up. It's like, oh yeah, the stakes are capitalism.
Yeah.
Him being a productive worker.
That is one of the things that I notice is that like it looks like every single person that has an if has to be middle class and up.
Yeah.
Because every single person that's shown to have an if, and in the montage at the end, like it's just this sensibility of like, oh, everybody has these high powered jobs or these fancy apartments, and I'm just stuck there thinking, okay, so a kid in a Brazilian favela doesn't have the mental power to imagine a marshmallow that is burning and the eyes are dripping down its face.
It kind of reminds me how in the opening montage, there's the line where like the daughter is like trying to figure out why her mom wanted her to tell us stories, and she's like, at first I thought she just wanted a distraction from what was happening in the world. And it, it kind of makes you think about like how, oh, is that like what, why Krasinski's making these movies to distract us from what's happening in the world and make us just think about, oh, I miss my imaginary friend from when I was younger. Maybe if I think about them for a second, that means they're really here with me, and that means that I'm happy.
It and that's what John Krasinski wants you to do. Like, he wants you to dig into your memories of a nicer, more pleasant time, and just relive them to be able to either cope or exist within the reality that you do. In my opening sentiments here, I mentioned how John Krasinski stayed at the doorway watching his two daughters live in an imaginary world, and that is where the motivation for this movie comes from. Let me read you something here. This is from a morning show interview. John Krasinski asked why he wanted this, and he said, I found myself spending hours in the threshold of a doorway watching them disappear into a magical world us as parents aren't invited into. And I just thought it would be a great movie. And actually, it was the pandemic when I started to see they were doing fewer and fewer imaginary games. Their lights seem to be going out. You can see fear settling in. They said, Daddy, are we gonna be okay? I said, stop. I gotta make a movie about that magical world you can go back to anytime.
LOL. He's just like, I don't, kids, shut the fuck up and let me make this movie.
That kind of feels like the subtext of the whole thing, and like maybe that's the point of the kid acting like an adult and him screaming at basically screaming at them with the movie. Please act like a kid forever.
Yeah.
And like that, but that is hit upon a couple of times in the movie. In the first half, there's a moment where B walks into her old room at her grandma's place, and she's confronted with like coloring book materials, and the grandma's like, "Oh, okay, you can paint and draw how you used to," and then she says, "I'm 12. I don't really do that anymore."
Yeah, it feels false for a lot of reasons, not least because the actress. It's pretty common for movies to cast someone who's a little bit older than the part they're playing, but like this is clearly someone who is like an older teenager playing a 12-year-old, and that feels off. The way that the movie insists that she needs to remain a child feels off. It feels like it's not really respectful to how children process information. It's just kind of insisting that they maintain this like permanent innocence, which I find just is not the case in better children's movies necessarily. And I don't know, it felt the whole time like the movie is sort of about her, but it doesn't actually have a lot of interest in her as a person.
No, it doesn't. And she's pretty much just like walking around in this world, action happening to her, or she stumbles upon action. And in that sense of John Krasinski wanting to be like, hey, stay a kid, or go back to being a kid, or think about that kid sensibility, is Ryan Reynolds. His whole characterization from beginning to end is what I would describe as fully just Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds. He is commenting on everything that's happening. He's like a soundboard, just hitting on every kind of like exclamation you could do. He at one point literally said, "Oh my God."
Yeah, it's like It's the typical Ryan Reynolds character, but like built with Duplo blocks because like they need to strip out some of the snark that might be too much from even his other movies that are already pretty juvenile.
Yeah, just big enough that you don't choke on it.
Yeah, he like trips like 7 times during this movie, and like yeah, none of the trips like it's always like at the in like the background of a scene. It's like, why does this even happen?
The timing of it always feels weird as
Yeah,
well.
like I definitely think that they probably just got some notes. They were like, oh, this needs to be funny, and they're like, okay, we know, just add this here, 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 and here, and we're good.
And I think it could have been good once or twice. I'm gonna say it. I like a pratfall every once in a while.
Yeah.
But it is too much.
Yeah.
And because Ryan Reynolds is just in this movie, a very one-dimensional character of just kind of disliking the girl, hating the ifs, and just wearing the most high-waisted pants and suspenders you've ever seen.
Yeah, Michelle and I saw Jackass 3D recently, and we laughed a ton. So that proves that, hey, pratfalls can be good.
Jackass is for the children.
Absolutely. But yeah, definitely suspenders were used better in RRR. But yeah, what did you think of the suspenders, Michelle?
There's way too many of them.
Absolutely.
There's a frightening number of suspenders in here. It feels like one of the many, many cutesy affectations that the movie has. Like everything about this movie really feels like an affectation, right down to a lot of the creative, like the more central creative choices. I think the way it's lit is an affectation. It's like notably Krasinski is using Janusz Kaminski, who is Steven Spielberg's regular cinematographer from the early 90s on. And I found that an interesting choice because the actual Spielberg movies that Krasinski is borrowing from, stuff like E.T. and Hook and his bad segment from the Twilight Zone movie, none of those are shot by Janusz Kaminski. They're all shot by different cinematographers like Alan Daviau and Dean Cundy. And like Spielberg hasn't made as many movies that are like pure celebrations of childhood since he's been working since the early 90s. Like the one that is coming to mind for me, the BFG, is not especially good, and it has a problem that sometimes comes with Kaminski being Spielberg's regular cinematographer these days, which is that he kind of overlights that, and it ends up feeling like everything is trapped in amber. I have this problem with the fourth Indiana Jones movie. I have this problem with the second Jurassic Park movie. I have this problem with the BFG, and sometimes it's appropriate for something like, say, Lincoln, but here it feels like Krasinski and Kaminsky are going like into hyperdrive with the chiaroscuro and the light like coming in through the windows.
There is a lot of windows in cinematography. Windows are literally a window into learning things.
It's trying to make the very idea of imagination like completely heavenly and wonderful the whole time, and it all feels overbearing. I feel similarly about the score, which is by Michael Giacchino of Pixar fame. This feels like him being asked to do a Pixar score, but like more cutesy.
I get that. So I didn't know. I didn't see who composed this, but I made a comment to you earlier that it's like I kind of liked the whistling that comes in and out throughout the movie in way more whimsy areas. But knowing now that this person that composed is from Pixar, the use of whistling is actually this artifact, the same kind that you're talking about, this throwback to a simpler mid-century style affectation that can be seen in the suspenders, the whistling, but also in the background of the apartments. Like you can see all of these things that feel a little they're very antecedent. One of them being this big locker in the background, this kind of like what you would see at a school with a bunch of different numbers. and these desks everywhere with a bunch of different paper. There is effectively no technology from the 21st century in this movie, including in the hospital, because it's this idea of taking it back to the mid-century, to the feeling of gossamer childhood.
Complete with a scene where Fiona Shaw and the actress who plays Bee are watching a movie from the 1950s about an imaginary friend, Harvey, in which Jimmy Stewart sees a 6-foot rabbit and is constantly talking to it, which, by the way, Spielberg almost remade in the 2000s.
Yeah, that reference is just as good as the reference to Shane in Logan. I think people are going to be being like, oh yeah, obviously they're just trying to make a movie like the good old days. Let's put TCM on and just Photoshop Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds into it.
And that literally happens in the movie. There is this dance sequence that it leads up to Ryan Reynolds in 80s gear. Wow, who would have thought? I also hate this fascination with the 80s, especially from someone like Ryan Reynolds, where a character's actually at a CRT TV in like a robe and just looking at it like a disenfranchised just retiree in an actual retirement home watching TCM.
Yeah, and this was what really irritated me as well, where it's sort of doing. I mentioned earlier that the kid singing Tina Turner because her parents love Tina Turner made sense to me. Making less sense to me is the music video for the Tina Turner song that is being recreated with Ryan Reynolds dancing during it. I don't know
That's wild.
who that is for, except parents that might remember it from when they were kids.
Yeah, and the thing about this sequence is it's basically the movie trying to show you how far imagination can go, because it's a whole thing where it's oh, this retirement home sucks, but what if a little girl just tried to think of whatever she could. And there's some parts of that whole sequence that I like the part where he breaks out of a painting. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that in Super Mario 64.
Yeah.
Do you think the way Krasinski was framing the hallways, he's trying to recall certain scenes from Inception? Also the beach scene?
Maybe, but I did get the feeling that that there was this center aligned Kubrick style of centering everything around this imaginary point. In that sequence, eventually all the imaginary friends are just piled around, and Ryan and Bee are just leaving, and then he turns around and says, "Hey, put on some pants, banana." And I'm just like, put a bullet in me.
Wait, the banana is wearing more clothing than several of the other imaginary friends because he's got a sweatband on, which is so weird.
When I was seeing that, it's for a 40-year-old that watched the gif of a peanut butter jelly time way back when. The idea of a banana wearing a sweatband is so old. There is no imagination here. Fuck it.
No, it's all purloined from other places.
True.
I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if the daughter was just genuinely incredibly impatient with Krasinski, not just Dad, I'm too old for this. You really got to take it seriously. But if she was one of the original Bad News Bears level disrespectful and cursing at him.
Take this serious, old man. Fuck.
The movie would probably be more enjoyable to me then.
We're fantasy casting a sequel, I guess. What if John Krasinski listens to this and he's like, you know what? They're right. So I'm going to make a sequel to this movie called If 2, and I'm going to include all their notes, and then I'm going to force them to watch that movie and podcast about it.
I would love that. That would mean the world is centered around me. And you know what? We've never tried it. It might be good.
I would hope that a better artist is listening in than John Krasinski, personally.
The good news is it seems like this movie isn't a complete blockbuster, so hopefully that means that John Krasinski will go completely bankrupt and never work in this town ever again.
According to Variety, this is a $110 million movie.
Yep, it is very. I don't know. I feel like it's sometimes churlish to like say, "Oh, this money could have been spent so many other ways." But I do like just kind of scratch my head that he got a blank check to make anything he wanted with the budget that he wanted, and he decided to make the most derivative children's movie ever made.
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk about some of the stuff we liked. That might be a stretch.
Go for it.
But we did stretch before this. There's a scene in the second half of this movie where the Bee and Ryan are trying to get the grandma Fiona to remember her ladybug imaginary friend. And the way they do this is that they start playing an album. I forget. I
It was
forget what-
Spartacus.
Yeah, it was from the Spartacus Ballet,
Okay.
which has previously been used in the Hudsucker Proxy.
Nice. Talk about mid-century. and and Fiona used to be a ballet dancer, and she wanted to be a ballet dancer, and dancing is something that is very meaningful to her. So they put this on, and then Fiona just kind of walks in, hears the music, and she starts twirling and swirling and moving her arms, and in behind the couch is B and the if, and they both really feel this magic that's coming out of Fiona, and to the point that the if starts glowing and mimicking the dance moves of Fiona. And as I was sitting there, I was just like, I love this. This is so sweet.
I love this for you, AP.
I am glad you enjoyed that scene.
I'm so thankful that y'all are biting your tongues here. All right, okay, thank you though. I appreciate it.
I think in order for that scene to work, the overall movie would have probably had to work for me. It really, I think it kind of felt as phony as everything else did in the movie.
True.
I appreciate Fiona Shaw's work in the scene.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very fun scene, and I love to see people. I love to see dancing, and
I did like her dancing. I was just distracted by the fact that the whole logic of the thing where like the imaginary friend is nearby when their original human goes through this emotional experience makes the imaginary friend like start glowing.
they go Super Saiyan.
Yeah. I think part of it was that this movie couldn't figure out what it wanted to do with the imaginary friends. First it wanted to pair them up with new kids. Then it's like, nope, we got to return them to their original kids. And this whole thing where like they threw a congratulations party for an imaginary friend just because it like glowed for a few seconds. And then like the logic, it's not consistent, where sometimes the glow causes the original human to see their imaginary friend again, and sometimes it doesn't. So that was like what was kind of distracting me throughout that entire thing.
And that's kind of the second part of this. It does the second part of the movie does lose its guidance, and it does take that turn when a little boy is they're trying to get them to adopt an imaginary friend, and this little boy's like at a hospital, broken leg, broken arm, broken body, and that kid is nothing other than just like an injured boy for the movie.
Played by the child from Minari, Alan Kim.
And he gets presented a bunch of different ifs, and none of them can be visible to him. So he's fucked. He's out of luck. It's over. He's never gonna have that magical moment where an if provides the emotional support that a parent should have, but spent too many hours writing a screenplay about them in an imaginary world.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the curious thing, like where it feels like have none of them had this experience before of losing a kid and not knowing what happens next? Because it feels like that is building up to he eventually does get paired with a friend that we don't see in the rest of the movie, and I guess that's one of the better, if still not well executed, ideas that the movie has, is that every imaginary friend is going to be specific to that child. But I don't think any of the imaginary friends really feel all that well sketched, except as like a cute idea that feels more like, again, an adult's idea of how a child thinks, complete with each imaginary friend being voiced by one of John Krasinski's adult celebrity friends.
And that dragon is dressed as a doctor.
Yeah.
And because it is just like, okay, what would an adult write for a kid that gets injured a lot? Oh, why not a doctor dragon voiced by Harrison Ford, which it wasn't, but might as well have been.
Yeah, it feels like it's following more linear logic than I imagine a child would necessarily have.
I agree. But we're talking about the things we like.
Oh, I
We're talking about
apologize.
the things we like.
So that's the thing about this movie is like one person starts talking about something that they like, and then we're like, no, that shit sucks. Here's why. And also this thing sucks, and then this thing sucks.
Well, you be the person.
Yeah.
Tell me what you like.
I'm probably the person who disliked this the least, but I feel like it's less liking it more and more just being, it's like the sedation worked on me sometimes.
It's perfectly frictionless.
Yeah.
You spend 107 minutes in the theater, and that 107 minutes are gone.
That's kind of one of my other and I'm sorry I'm going on about things I do not like. But one of my frustrations with it is I feel like a lot of the better children's movies do have a certain level of friction in them. There's like E.T. is a little bit weird. Like some of the better Pixar movies are at least a little bit weird. This movie is only weird insofar as how seriously it takes its own conceit and how, I don't know, just sanded down for acceptability it feels.
Yeah. No, I am with you there.
I feel like what I enjoyed the most were certain soundtrack choices, but it was mostly me being like, why is he using this? Like,
I got some stuff on
the
that.
Spartacus thing bothered me less. The use of "Ooh La La" by the Faces, famously used right at the end, famously used at the end of Rushmore. I love hearing the song, but also was scratching my head because that is a song that is at least, well, it's, I wish I knew what I know now when I was younger. And that's a song that is used in Rushmore, ironically, because the lyrics are kind of misogynistic. And
Incredibly.
the character is growing out of that, presumably, at the end of Rushmore. And this, it feels like it's being used sincerely here without any actual consideration for what the song is about or what it's trying
I think it
to...
is being used sincerely because one of the things about this movie is that it is not a kids movie. This is a dad movie. This is a movie for all the dads out there.
And specifically for dads who watch children's movies on their own, which, yeah.
I mean, they exist.
I know they exist.
But this is a dad movie. This is a dad movie because we get to see the frustrations and the anxieties of the three characters here: John Krasinski, Ryan Reynolds. These aren't their characters' names, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then also B. The frustration comes in because the B is imaginary friend is Ryan Reynolds, who's supposed to be a clown. This is the big twist at the end. Spoilers. And And we see the end is John Krasinski is unknowable illness gets cured. There's this emotional scene where John Krasinski's character might die right in front of B, who presumably would not want to see her other parent die. But of course, there is the freedom of knowing that this doesn't happen because John Krasinski survives. Except B goes back to the apartment only to learn that Ryan Reynolds doesn't exist because that's her imaginary friend that used to be a clown but is now Ryan Reynolds. And she doesn't see him anymore. So she goes through that loss of a parent anyway, but then that gets cut down because Ryan Reynolds eventually does live still. So this is for the dads because the dads are like, oh, you'll miss me when I'm gone, except when I'm not gone. Except you'll miss me when I am gone, except when I'm actually not gone.
Was anyone surprised by that twist?
I think Nomi was. Nomi did not see it coming.
I wasn't surprised per se. The use of faces hits on that because that is definitely a patriarchal conversation between a father and son. And in the movie, the way that it's played is B does eventually learn the lesson of maybe you should love your dad.
Yeah, I just feel like it's telegraphed, one, by the similar personas and looks of Ryan Reynolds and John Krasinski, two, by the fact that nobody talks to Ryan Reynolds except B and the other imaginary friends. Like, it feels very like Sixth Sense Junior almost.
The receptionist with the unicorn didn't acknowledge this adult.
It was like, well, okay, like where I was kind of drumming my fingers impatiently. I'm like, yeah, okay, he's her imaginary friend. Okay, let's please reveal that soon, because then the movie will be almost over.
And imagine your imaginary friend being just like a human being while everyone else is like a CGI thing. Like what does that make you think about yourself?
It makes me think that this child does not have a lot of imagination. And it's curious because it felt like Ryan Reynolds was meant to be like some sort of a hybrid of both her and her dad, because he's taking things more seriously the way she is. But it also is hinted that he has been her imaginary friend for quite some time.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, if that was my imaginary friend, I would forget about him too.
I would as well.
Well, she didn't, because she ended up adopting the suspenders and high-waisted pants look, which is just a crime.
A great look for a teenage child or a preteen child, whatever she's supposed to be.
And let's talk about, she commits a fashion crime, but let's talk about other crimes, specifically John Krasinski. There is a show, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, that is very much like this.
Yeah. Foster's Home, it's a Doveweather favorite. It ran for many seasons in the 2000s. And I miss that show a lot. And, it made me think about how much like creativity they put into all the different characters. And like the thing about this movie is that like you're not gonna really remember any of these imaginary characters like a week from now. Like the blue guy, no, there's no juice. There's no juice.
How dare you? I'm gonna remember Bubbles, imaginary friend that pops every once in a while.
Like even Coco only says Coco, and yet she has more personality than like every single imaginary friend.
The imaginary friend that has the most personality is the one voiced by Louis Gossett Jr., and that's only because I'm aware that it's one of his last movies, and I'm feeling sad that he is putting so much into it.
and it sucks. That characterization, I when I learned it was Luis Casa Jr., I immediately disliked the character because the character just fundamentally is a magical Negro in this text, and wild to learn that I literally learned that he died at the credits.
Yeah, character actors, you kind of go where the work is, even if you're an Oscar-winning character actor. But he had good roles later in his life. I know. I didn't see Watchmen, but I know people really liked him on that. I thought he was good on Hap and Leonard. No, this is definitely not one of the roles that I think I will remember Louis Gossett Jr. for.
And the thing is, like, he's just playing an old man teddy bear in old man clothes and a cane, which in Foster's, the character Coco, who is a coconut tree for a head on a airplane body and chicken legs, that lays down Easter eggs that have whatever you need in them at that time, or maybe something random. In Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Marcia, can you give us a premise again?
Yeah, so the main characters are Mac and Blue. Mac is a little kid, and Blue is his imaginary friend. And basically, they get brought to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Mac, he's getting older.
He's 8,
yeah,
by the way.
He's 8 years old. And you got Wilt, who's this tall, red guy. You got the aforementioned Coco. You have Eduardo, who's this like purple guy with horns, very hairy.
A monster, a Mexican monster,
Yeah.
played by
Tom Kenny.
Tom Kenny in brownface, which you know what? I'll let it pass. He is Bob Esponja after all. But Aquafina is an if, but not in the black scent. So
Yeah. I mean, Foster's like, you don't really need much of a story because like it's a TV show where obviously they have like their own story for every episode. But, you got Frankie. I had a huge crush on Frankie when I was younger.
Frankie, is she the redheaded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
she's the granddaughter of Madame
Foster,
Foster,
yeah.
Oh,
who
yeah,
started
okay.
this foster home for imaginary friends, and she in the show is like 22. I looked it up. So she's like a young adult.
Yeah. And then Madame Foster's imaginary friend is Mr. Harriman, who is a huge stickler.
I think I remember this. I only ever saw bits and pieces of the show when my siblings were watching it, but some of this is actually like popping in my memory way
Yeah.
more than if just a couple of hours after we saw
That's
it.
the thing, is that because it is the creator Craig McCracken is making actual choices here, artistic choices.
Yeah, this feels a lot more like there's another bad children's movie from the 90s about imaginary friends called Bogus. Are you familiar with Bogus?
I don't know.
It is long forgotten. Whoopi Goldberg plays a businesswoman who has to take in a child after his mom, her old friend, dies. And the child has an imaginary friend who suddenly Whoopi Goldberg can see. The imaginary friend is just a Frenchman played by Gerard Depardieu. This is not a good movie. It is remembered really only for a bizarrely passionate argument it inspired between Siskel and Ebert.
That's wild.
Yeah, I wish Siskel and Ebert were alive today to see this.
I think Ebert might give it 3 stars. He could have some odd takes sometimes.
You can see a lot of parallels in between If and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. So many parallels it makes you question. There is in both there's an imaginary friend named
Blue.
and like it's instead of a Foster's Home, it's a
Retirement home.
and in both have wacky places where these imaginary friends live. There's an old lady there. There's all these small things. I watched the 3 episode premiere for the show, which was released as a movie, and that movie has way more emotional depth than If. There's like the mom character, the mom of Mac is like an overworked mother that's absent. The older brother is kind of like a mean brother.
Terrence.
And Terrence is a bully that joins up with another bully, the Duchess, who's this kind of grotesque Picasso-like painting. And this is where the real fun comes in. In If, it seems like everyone who has an imaginary friend is of a certain higher economic status.
Yeah.
And in Foster Home for Imaginary Friends, Mac is of a low economic status, right? He's a proletariat. Like he's a poor kid in an apartment. And the mom is working long hours. Except the rich kid comes into Foster's home to try to adopt an imaginary friend. And that is where we learn that not everyone can conjure up an imaginary friend. And it might have to do something with
class.
Exactly.
That's interesting. It's certainly playing with that element more openly and honestly than If is. I know you wanted to get in a little bit of the politics of this movie and of Krasinski in general.
Yeah, so like I have a couple of crimes that John Krasinski's done. And I think that first crime comes from If and the Foster Home for Imaginary Friends. There's just too many coincidences there. I don't like that. There's some other ones though. John Krasinski has a history of, well, let's just say, having great economic success with properties. One of them being Lip Sync Battle. Have y'all ever heard of it?
Yes.
Yep.
Have y'all ever seen any of it?
I've
No.
seen the one with Tom Holland and Zendaya because that one made a lot of people gay.
It made me gay. It was a very actually well done presentation. Zendaya as Bruno Mars is incredible, and Tom Holland as
Rihanna, right? Because he did Umbrella.
Yeah, singing Umbrella, very fun, very charismatic, very very enjoyable. It hits well. That's from Lip Sync Battle, which came out in Spike, the network Spike, which I used to watch because,
Toxic Male.
Yes, that's right. In it, these two celebrities, and it's always celebrities, are put head to head in a singing contest, a lip singing contest, and whoever wins just wins. This is a clear ripoff of Lip Sync for Your Life, part of the final section of every single RuPaul Drag Race episode. Have y'all ever seen?
Yes.
It's in pieces, I think.
Yeah,
maybe.
I've seen 2 full seasons of RuPaul's with my sister.
And at the end of it, it's effectively the same situation. 2 people, or maybe more, go head to head in a lip sync battle to see who could perform better, and whoever does perform better gets saved. And I looked into the history of lip syncing in the drag performance. It can be seen as coming up from queer performers trying to live a nightlife either somewhere where they need to be quiet in a speakeasy mode, in somewhere rural, somewhere very clandestinely located, like in a basement, like a house party. It might have come from them not being able to have a live band, but being able to have a jukebox. And so if you have a jukebox, if you have music, and music always goes great at a party, you can just perform and get tips and make your living off that way by just having access to this jukebox, this music. And there's real history there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is so great about like lip syncs and how they're used in queer and trans and drag spaces is that, like, for instance, if a trans person is doing a lip sync, may not have the same voice as the performer that they're lip syncing to, but when they're lip syncing to the music, the femininity of the voice coming out of their body like really adds to the process of making it a more queer and feminine image.
Yeah.
And then you get that all stripped away in a John Krasinski show.
All of it away. I read this article on Variety about the history of it. Very, very useful. The show was created by John Krasinski and Stephen Merchant as a spin-off from Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. Only golden eggs from that goose. And that show's incredibly successful. Both in the show, it ran for 5 seasons. On YouTube, the top 3 videos have millions of views. The first one being Dwayne Johnson versus Jimmy Fallon. That has 79 million views. The second one being Channing Tatum and Channing Tatum's wife, Jenna Dewan Tatum, at the time, with 63 million views. And then the final one being Anna Kendrick and John Krasinski. Like, they have millions of views.
Good for them, honestly. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I am not among the viewers, I don't think.
I wasn't either. This was me researching was the first time I saw all of them.
Yeah, I do remember some of these clips going viral on Twitter. Like, I remember the Channing Tatum one going viral because people love to watch Channing Tatum dance. I mean, just look at the Magic Mike films. So
I'll just watch those. Thank you.
Yeah, he's great. And even in Step Up, he was also great. And if you contrast it with Lip Sync for Your Life, multiple videos in the millions, but nothing approaching what John Krasinski and Stephen Merchant have done. But it's because of that. John Krasinski is great at shaving off the hard edges of things and removing the flavor of things, and somehow just parboiling something in front of you and delivering it to you and saying, isn't this a magical piece of art that I created?
And you were saying something after we got out of the movie about some of the other things that he's bringing are just a sort of reaffirming of traditional values.
Yeah. This is a very conservative movie,
I would agree.
Because it is asking you to look back at your memories, to think of the beautiful times of the past and bring them to the present, and when things are difficult, and that is presented in the movie multiple times.
Yeah, definitely. When Louis Gossett Jr. is sitting with B on the bench, and it's like, all you gotta do is close your eyes, and everything will be good.
I rolled my eyes so hard. Yeah, it feels like it's beyond nostalgia and more like a weaponized feeling of nostalgia to crowd out any complicated feelings about anything.
Mm-hmm. And then that scene with of going back in time to, once again, the mid-century. I was looking for like, I don't know, the difficulties of that time, and none of them were presented.
Yeah. I mean, and perhaps we wouldn't expect that necessarily from a children's movie, but it is, I think, somewhat consistent with Krasinski's point of view in some of the other things that he's either written or directed. I'm not a big fan personally of A Quiet Place for a few reasons. A lot of it being just I'm not super impressed with the direction, with the performances, with how well thought out the conceit is beyond. I don't know. I think it's a good gimmick, poorly done among other. And people love talking about the whiteboard in that movie, but there's a lot of other examples. And one thing about that movie that has always stood out to me is that they are like protecting a traditional rural farmhouse the whole time, and it is very much a patriarch's view of protecting his family.
Down to having the trad wife.
Yeah, down to having his actual wife in the movie.
Yeah, pregnant and very comfortable running a home, even in the post-apocalypse.
Yeah, the post-apocalypse, that's like, it's very, you have to avoid making any noise, so they're at a creaky farmhouse that they have renovated into a security depot.
Isn't that so nice, creating a world where everyone needs to be quiet, including your wife?
And, yeah. But there's also, I have not seen either of the first two movies that he directed, though I know The Hollers is about a guy going back to his middle America home to deal with a family member who is dying of cancer, so there's definitely a connection here.
What is up with this man? Like, it might be a stretch here, but it feels like the only way John Krasinski present like some of the more difficult emotions of like represent the negative emotions of sadness or grief, or even like caring for others, and the difficulty of that is through death.
Death, and specifically death that makes you let go of any complicated feelings about that family member. There's also, so I mentioned before we headed into the movie that I have seen a movie that John Krasinski co-wrote with Matt Damon, who is one of the imaginary friends in this. He was the sunflower leading the group therapy for the imaginary friends.
That also hit me existentially.
So Matt Damon was going to, in 2012, make his directorial debut with a movie called Promised Land, which he co-wrote with John Krasinski, in which they both star in. And as I understand it, he didn't have enough time to prep for it because he had to do reshoots for Elysium. Didn't help. And he brought in Gus Van Sant, among other things, who directed him in Good Will Hunting, to take the helm. Mm-hmm. Didn't help this movie very much. And Promised Land, do you know what it's about by any chance?
No, no.
So Matt Damon is a guy who works for an oil company, specifically in convincing landowners to sign over their land to be fracked.
That is so John Krasinski.
Well, it's going to get better because it's about his crisis of conscience as he's doing this, especially as John Krasinski comes in as a activist who is trying to convince them not to do it. He's very annoying in the role from the very beginning. He's meant to be an overbearing activist, but one that you broadly agree with because the movie is about Matt Damon's redemption. The movie has a twist that is one of the most ludicrous twists I have ever seen in a movie, and I feel like it's probably okay to spoil it because nobody has seen Promised Land since 2012.
Do it.
Okay, so partway through, Krasinski says, well, my home was fracked, my farmland home in Kansas, and it completely ruined the environment around me. And Damon spots a lighthouse that could not be in Kansas and is actually in Lafayette, Louisiana, I think, somewhere. It's in Louisiana.
That is so fun.
But wait. So it becomes clear that the guy is lying about his background, so you can't trust this activist. But he confronts Krasinski, and Krasinski reveals that he knows more about something than he would have if he were just like a bullshitter. It turns out Krasinski is also working for the oil company to discredit activists. He
Yikes.
plays the moment where this is revealed and he gives the act up and starts playing like I'm a bad guy is one of the worst acted moments of the 2010s. Like truly, truly, truly terrible.
Oh my god, that's crime.
I have been waiting to talk about this with anyone for the longest time because nobody remembers this piece of shit movie.
That sounds like the a worse version of First Reformed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially because in First Reform,
Deals with the actual complicated feelings and the ethical implications of standing by and doing nothing, but also the ethical implications of potentially doing something.
But John Krasinski knows how to take sandpaper or a hatchet and make that big old piece of wood into something soft and easy to consume.
Yeah, I can't imagine John Krasinski wearing a bomb vest in this movie.
I can imagine that, but maybe it would take a turn. The movie would take a turn. The bomb vest is his imaginary friend.
Oh, yeah.
He also starred in the Benghazi movie that Michael Bay directed, 13 Hours.
Yeah, which I have not seen.
It is skillfully made, but pretty evil.
That's the thing, is that another thing about John Krasinski is that in another crime, is that he loves the CIA. He loves just like the status quo militarism.
Yeah, he was on that TV show, the Jack Ryan TV show for Amazon, which as someone who read more as a teenager of those not good Tom Clancy novels than I'd care to admit, I have a perhaps misguided affection for them, even though they are largely not good. Jack Ryan is a character with no flaws, and who is always right.
Oh, like John Krasinski?
Yeah, but it's funny that back in the last time they tried to turn that series into, they tried to do that with a movie. It was that 2014 one with Chris Pine that was directed by Kenneth Branagh, and it is a bad movie. But in the press tour for it, in the middle of an interview, Chris Pine is like, yeah, I don't know. I've got some mixed feelings about the CIA, and I've got some mixed feeling. I voted for Obama, but he's doing a lot of the Bush era policies.
King.
It says in the middle of the interview, he only looked at his phone at one point to look up the name of the American who was killed by drone strike. So, slightly different attitudes from the actors taking on that character. Most memorably played by Alec Baldwin and Harrison Ford.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think, Marcy? How much do you love John Krasinski's love for big old state looking at you and everything you do?
Flat out saying that we should not only be grateful for the CIA, but thank them.
Yeah, I avoid all the John Krasinski CIA movies and TV shows. Like Jack Ryan, I'm not interested in Jack Ryan. Not interested in Jack Reacher. I know Krasinski's not in that, but they might as well be the same show to me. Yeah, I don't need any of that stuff. The only show about the CIA that I watched was Homeland, and like only like the first 3 or 4 seasons. I love the part where like they were filming like in another country, and then that someone just like wrote like Homeland. Like they basically wrote like a diss track about Homeland like in graffiti, and then like the people who were making the show didn't realize it because the only language they knew was English. So
I have not seen the actual show. You just couldn't have convinced me to watch a full show of John Krasinski being pro CIA, but I have seen a clip where he is talking to an audience and asking them, who do you think the most dangerous country in the world is? And he waits for many answers that you might expect, and he finally says, well, what about Venezuela?
This guy is in love with the CIA. I wanted to watch Jack Ryan, like the first episode of season 1 and the last episode season 4, just to see how it goes. But I was about 10 minutes into the first episode, and Jack Ryan is just this like pencil neck nerd that kind of then has to continue to like go down this path of quote unquote badassery to get what he wants and what he needs. I was just like, nah, I'm good. I'm out of here.
Yeah, I think casting Alec Baldwin as that character is probably the best way to do it, because then we understand, well, he's also a dick.
True. Another crime, and maybe the most grievous one, is being happily married to Emily Blunt. Just kind of, seems cosmically unfair.
What, that talented actor would be married to a less talented actor?
Yes.
I hope they are very happy.
Where's a more talented podcaster that I could marry,
I heard Nomi's single. You could always marry her.
Nah, I'm good. I'm good there. But so that's John Krasinski. You know what? Fuck him. I don't like him. I'm just gonna be straight.
I am broadly not a fan of his work.
I'm neutral.
Sus.
I'm negative about him in this, but I'm positive about him in the early seasons of The Office, so it evens out.
One of the last things here I want to tackle is just sincerity. Is if sincere to you? And sincere, the definition we're gonna go with is just the lack of unnecessary layers or artifice needed to present something and enjoy something and be that thing, I should say.
To me, it's Hollywood sincere. Like, I didn't really feel any of the emotions that it was trying to convey. Like, I could tell it was trying to do them, but like, it didn't really feel like I was watching a human story.
No, I would say I'd be willing to bet that it is coming from a personal place for Krasinski, but I don't think he really finds a way to convey that in a way that is actually felt. He mostly leans on shorthand, and it ends up feeling insincere because of it.
Mm-hmm. I see that. I think it is sincere. Because I think John Krasinski is sincere about his love for his daughters and his wife, and this is presented here not in a very
compelling
way, absolutely, but this is kind of a major topic on the podcast, like the search for sincerity. And I present this piece of media to say that sincerity, you could be as sincere as possible in your art, and it still might be shit.
Yeah, I mean, that is just kind of an honest assessment where I feel like something can be personally important to you. You can put all your heart and soul into it, and it can still just end up being not very good, not very memorable, not very original. It's just, part of creating art. So I can maybe appreciate that much, but I also feel like there's only so much credit I can give when you're doing it on such a grand scale and with that much money. Like, there's only so much props for trying I can give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can give props to the hundreds of VFX artists that we saw as we sat through the credits. Hey, at least they got paid. I'm sure they put some of their heart into it, but I hope the next movie they work on is something better.
Yeah, I hope the next movie they work on is something better. I hope that I hope to enjoy something that Krasinski makes someday as a director. I actually don't like feeling closed off to filmmakers or to actors, even ones that I've disliked in the past. I mean, it has led me to enjoying Ryan Reynolds in a couple of things, but I just I can't say I'm going to count on the next John Krasinski movie or the next Ryan Reynolds movie as a surefire bet that for something that's going to entertain me. I will not be seeing Deadpool 3.
I would love to see a movie that is introduced as from the twisted mind of John Krasinski.
Oh, good Lord.
Like, I want to know how he gets real weird with it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like it would be pretty similar to Deadpool, just like very juvenile humor that tries to act like it's pushing boundaries.
Yeah, or I don't know, a horror movie that only further feels like it is pushing a traditional view of the family, even as it is trying to be edgy. That could be from the twisted mind of John Krasinski.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is my son. He wants to be a daredevil. Oh, isn't that so tragic that, you know, me, the father of this child, might have a dead child?
A John Krasinski horror movie where the child keeps getting into scrapes because he's a daredevil, and his parents take on all of the pain and all of the injuries.
And isn't that just horrible?
It is horrible. You shouldn't do that to your mother and father.
Wear a helmet. I am happy to say that John Krasinski is a sincere actor. He is absolutely doing this out of sincerity. And that doesn't always mean a good thing. But thank you for listening to If and the Crimes of John Krasinski. I have been AP. I've been joined by
Marcy.
And I've been joined by
Michelle?
Michelle, where can people see you? Where can people find your great work?
My great work. Well, you can certainly follow me on Letterbox at Apply No Rules. I am sometimes writing freelance criticism, sometimes not. I guess just keep an eye out for my byline.
Yeah. That we will have links to the Letterbox, your Letterbox, in the description. So head on over, read the Love Lies Bleeding review, which I did read before we recorded because I just watched the movie.
Oh yeah,
and I agree with you. I agree. It's a good movie, and the weirdness in it, the lesbian disaster romance, wonderful.
That is definitely a little more my speed than movies about the wonders of imagination.
Yeah, and you do not have to imagine a next episode coming out because we release 2 episodes a month. You can follow us at
Dove Weather on Instagram.
You can also give us a 5-star review. Maybe tell your friends. Maybe tell your mom. Maybe tell your imaginary friend.
And I also heard a rumor that we're on YouTube now. So if you're not watching on YouTube, you can do that too.
Yeah, definitely go see that. Put that on your second monitor while you work and while you're trying to keep that bubble green. So thank you for listening. And we will see you in 2 weeks with another banger of an episode.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.